Hey everybody, Dr. Phil here. This is going to be a video on cross-cultural variations in consumer behavior. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. So the first thing I want to talk about here is globalization. So what is globalization? So you think about the word globe, like the world. Obviously, it speaks to, how the economies of the countries of the world now are more, interconnected and intertwined than they've ever been. This means more than exports and imports. And it can also involve values, lifestyles, and attitudes, kind of being imported and exported around the world. Um, Globalization is changing from a one-way influence from the US to other countries to now it's more of a probably a two-way street or a multi-directional street in a sense of, as the things like technology, travel, the world becomes an increasingly smaller place. Um, as it says, there's a lot of mutual influence, right? There's cultures being imported and exported all around and all over the world. So the idea of culture is the complex whole that includes knowledge, belief, art, law, morals, customs, and any other capabilities and habits acquired by humans as members of society. So it's kind of an overarching concept of culture, if you will. Now here we see a figure that shows the values, norms, sanctions, and consumption patterns with respect and in the context of the wider purview of the concept of culture. So we know that cultural values give rise to norms and associated sanctions, which in turn influence consumption patterns. Now, cultures are not static, they typically evolve and change slowly over time. They don't typically change quickly, but they do typically change slowly over time and given time. So cultural values, we can kind of split these into norms, these specify the ranges of appropriate behavior, and then sanctions, which we can define as the penalties for violating those norms. And then, of course, that leads us into consumption patterns. So here we see some of the factors you could say that influence nonverbal communications. And we'll go through these individually. I'll talk a little bit more in the lecture about each one of these, just briefly and succinctly. Things like time, etiquette, things, agreements, relationships, right, symbols, and space. So with regard to space, we can think of this as the overall use and meanings assigned to space vary widely among different cultures. Space could be connected to rank, but it could also speak to people's personal space. With respect with symbols, or with respect to symbols, we could think of these in the context of colors, animals, shapes, numbers, and music have varying meanings across cultures. A failure to recognize the meanings assigned to a symbol can often cause serious problems, in between one culture and the next. It could be a sort of a cultural faux pas, if you will. With regard to relationships, how quickly and easily do cultures form relationships and make friends? Americans tend to form relationships and friends quickly and easily, whereas if we look, for example, at the Chinese relationships we know are much more complex and characterized by what we call guanxi. With respect to agreements, how does a culture ensure business obligations are honored? How are disagreements resolved? Some cultures rely on a legal system, others rely on relationships and friendships, so on and so forth. With regard to things, the cultural meanings of things leads to purchase patterns that one would not otherwise predict. The differing meanings that cultures attach to things, including products, make gift giving a particularly difficult task. So, some gifts in some countries might be appropriate, in other countries they may be inappropriate. In some countries, even giving a gift would be, fully expected. In other countries and cultures, it would be considered a, sort of, as I said earlier in the lecture, a sort of a cultural faux pas, if you will. With regard to etiquette, we can think of this as the generally accepted ways of behaving in social situations. Behaviors considered rude or obnoxious in one culture may be quite acceptable in another. Normal voice tone, pitch, and speed of speech differ between cultures and languages, as do the use of gestures. And with respect to global demographics, let's first talk about what we mean by demographics, because that's, maybe a word that you hear a lot. Maybe you're not sure, quite what that word means. So let's discuss. The demographics speaks to a population in terms of its size, structure, and distribution. Demographics are both a result and a cause of cultural values. For example, densely populated societies such as China are likely to have more of a collective orientation than an individualistic one. Disposable income is one aspect of demographics. Also, the rapid growth in personal income in parts of China has led to an explosion of car ownership, as shown in the image that we see here to the right. This has resulted in increased personal freedom, but also concerns about congestion and emissions. Now, with regard to global demographics, we can also talk about what we call PPP, triple P. So triple P stands for purchasing power parity. Now, marketers increasingly use purchasing power parity rather than average or median income to evaluate markets. So the idea of, again, PPP, purchasing power parity, or triple P, is based on the cost of a standard market basket of products bought in each country. And here we see the following 5 countries in terms of triple P. So we kind of start on the lower end, Brazil, per capita income, 9130. At the percent of total income to top 10% is 42%. Per capita PPP is 14,890. So on and so forth. And then we get to the higher end, the UK, 42,220, and the US, 65,850. So let's talk about cross-cultural marketing strategy. So what are some considerations in approaching a foreign market for perhaps a domestic firm that, is thinking about investing, perhaps opening up facilities or just exporting products to a foreign country? So number one, is the geographic area homogeneous or heterogeneous with respect to culture? So what we mean by that is the culture pretty much the same, or does it differ as you kind of move around the country? So India would be a good example of a heterogeneous culture. Number two, what needs can this product or a version of it fill in this culture? Number three, can enough of the people needing the product afford the product? Because it's one thing for you to figure out as a firm, for the firm to figure out that a lot of people want this, but if they can't afford it, then it isn't worth producing it and sending it over. Number four, what values or patterns of values are relevant to the purchase and use of this product? Number five, what are the distribution, political, and legal structures for the product? Number six, in what ways can we communicate about the product? And number seven, what are the ethical implications of marketing this product in this country? So, there are some countries where, for example, alcohol is taboo. So, trying to sell to alcohol, may have moral and indeed ethical implications. And then with respect to applications in consumer behavior, uniformity is sometimes possible, but companies often must adapt to cultural differences. McDonald's adapts its products as appropriate for various cultures. So, for example, if you went to McDonald's in India, where of course cows are sacred, they don't eat beef, then you wouldn't see a beef burger on the menu. You might see maybe like a veggie burger. McDonald's also adapts its store layout. As the image shows, it offers both family and single sections in Muslim countries to accommodate the cultural norms governing interactions between men and women. The single section is for men only. Okay, that's all for this video, and I will see you all in another video. Take care.